Hey everyone, welcome back to another video from All You Can Board. I'm Dylan. Today we are talking about Biblios. Now, not the original Biblios, I think this is the first one that was released, but the newest version of Biblios, which is Biblios, Quill, and Parchment, and this is a roll and write version of Biblios. So today's video, what I thought I would do is sort of compare the Biblios that a lot of you might know and that I personally love, I know Carlo loves it as well, and the newest version, and sort of, if you're coming from Biblios, is this a game that you're immediately going to love? Is this a game you're going to be offended by because it's ruining the sanctity of the original? Or do they both have a place? And just sort of give you a sort of a review of the new version, but also compared to the original in that sort of context. Right out of the gate, the first thing I need to tell you is that there's a huge offense with the new version that is, I think, the biggest criticism I'm going to have about this before we even jump in, and that's that the original had this beautiful way of opening up that kind of feels like, you're reading a book a little bit, maybe not reading a book, but it has that beautiful way of opening, and that I personally love. And the new version doesn't do that. It opens like a standard board game. So I was a little bit disappointed about that, but I'm not going to hold it against them too much, Stephen. I'll let it slide because spoiler alert, I actually did really enjoy this version of the game. So we're going to jump right into it. Biblios is one of my favorite games. It's it's not my favorite game of all time, but I really love it. And it was actually an early game that I got in my collection, and I don't think I really appreciated it until I played it later on. I think I had played it as a two-player game mostly at first. It sort of sat on the shelf as a bit of a shelf of shame game. Shelf of shame game. Say that 3 times fast. And I didn't really understand the brilliance of it until I started playing it with 3 and 4 players more often. And the best part of Biblios, the part I personally love about it, is just how mean and grueling of a game it is. If you know me from other videos or have heard me and Carlo talk, one of the reasons we love Lost Cities so much is because it makes you dread taking your turn in the best way possible. I mean that, in that, you have so many things you have to decide to try to do, and you don't want to get rid of a card, and you just you hate having to take your turn. You almost wish you could say, can I just skip my turn? Biblios doesn't feel quite, it's not that sort of same level of meanness, but it's that you have 3 cards and you're basically deciding, of those 3 cards, one by one, are you going to keep it for yourself? Are you going to put it in the common display or in the common pile that'll be dealt with in the next phase? Or are you going to put it face up for other players to potentially add into their hands? And all the cards that you're deciding to do this between are things like gold that you're going to spend in the next phase to do an auction style, the game changes into an auction game, or the actual, I think they're called, are they scripture cards or book cards? I can't remember what they're called in the original game, but it's the main cards in the deck of the varying 5 colors of different values that you're adding into your hand. Everything you're doing is in service of the 5 dice that are in the center of the board. The 5 dice start at a value of 3, I believe, across the board, and those dice will move to being as high as a 6, as low as a 1 by the players, depending on who they think is collecting the most of those colors. So I could collect the most of blue, and I could score for blue and have the right to be the only one that scores for blue. But if everyone saw me doing that and was able to reduce that die value to a 1, I score a single point for all that work I've been putting into blue. And that's where the genius comes in, is you can't just decide I'm going to go in and bid everything on these colors and I'm going to get my points that way, because you might not get the points you're looking for. And it's a testament to, I'll attest to that, because there's been so many games where people have gotten, a single point, 2 points, 0 points even is very common. And I want to point this out because I've had a couple discussions as of late with Carlo where I had to remind him that he, on multiple occasions, has gotten 0 points with his risk-taking way of playing games. And both times he seems to have forgotten the fact that he got 0 points. So just in case he hasn't reviewed this part of the video, I think you should go into the comments and you should remind Carlo, hey, remember that time that you got 0 points in Biblios? Oof, really gotta, on the next time you play, you really gotta bounce back from that one. Maybe see if you can get Dylan to get 0 points. I'm pretty sure I have as well, but that's one of the joys of Biblios, is it can be so grueling that sometimes you don't score anything, and you can't really fault anything. It's not that the game's bad, it's just that it can be very difficult sometimes to balance what every player's interests are and your own, while also manipulating the dice. So I've gone on enough about the original Biblios. That's not what this video is about. I love this game, and there's a lot of reasons I love it. It's mostly because of trying to discern what's in people's hands, what their strategies are, manipulating the dice, and going after the small number of points. Changing gears now to Quill and Parchment. So I am going to be the first to admit, when I started playing this game, when I first set it up on the table, even received it, even knew of its existence, I did not have high expectations. That is mostly because when you love a game as much as Biblios, and I just had this happen with Lost Cities and Lost Cities Roll and Write, sometimes you worry that when they're trying to do a new version of a game that you love, especially a popular game, that it's just sort of realizing, hey, this is a popular game, let's cash in on that. Let's release more versions of it. We've seen that with tons of games recently, and not even just recently, over the years. We have Roll for the Galaxy and Race for the Galaxy. We have Terraforming Mars and Ares Expedition, Lost Cities Roll and Write, the Biblios example. Like, I could go on and on. Sushi Go, Sushi Roll, Castles of Burgundy, the card game. Like, there's endless examples of this. Some do it right, some do it wrong. I feel like at some point we need to do a video specifically about this topic, but I just assumed that, it was going to be really tough for Biblios to replicate what made this game so special in a roll and write. And what I realized as I played it is, first of all, I was completely caught off guard by how much I loved this version of Biblios. And two, it didn't try to replicate the experience. It took aspects of it, it was inspired by, and it took elements you don't normally see in a roll and write, or maybe wouldn't have expected to see, and made that the focus. That's what I loved about this version, is that it didn't try to be Biblios and say, let's just see how we can package that as a roll and write. At least I didn't feel that way. It felt like they said, here are the elements that we think would be interesting in a roll and write that Biblios specifically, did in the original game, or just, elements that it was inspired by, and they made it work, and they made it work beautifully, to the point that I haven't played a roll and write quite like this. And since there's so many roll and writes out there, that's what made this such a surprising experience. So, Biblios, Quill, and Parchment is a it warrants the name Biblios in there. Don't think that it doesn't, it's just trying to get some extra bucks by putting Biblios in there. It replicates a lot of the same things. So you have the two distinct phases of the game like Biblios had. Biblios felt like, you played one game, and then what you did in the first game influenced the second game, but it was two, separate games that were part of the same game, if that makes sense. That's sort of one of the aspects of Biblios that's retained here. So there are two distinct phases of the game. You play the first 4 rounds, and it feels like you're doing one thing. You play the second 4 rounds, and you're doing something quite different. And the second phase of the game does have to do with auctioning, and the auction is based on what you did in the first phase. So that is also retained from Biblios. It doesn't keep some of the, I'll explain the rules a little bit more first. So basically, it's a roll and write game. You're rolling a lot of dice. There's going to be 3 or 4 different kinds of dice, and you're going to have a mix of them to start. You're going to roll these dice, and certain dice are going to be, written down on your sheet in different ways. You have 2 dice that specifically are adding to your influence, and that influence number that you end up with after 4 rounds is going to be what you can use as basically your gold from the first game to pay for your bids in the second phase. So that's one thing you're doing. Then you're also collecting the books, and so basically, depending which color you roll, you're marking off books on these different vertical tracks. You want to get as high up as you possibly can, and if you're the first one to the top, you're going to get some bonus points as well. Whoever is higher on each of these tracks at the end of the game is going to have the right to score whatever values on the die multiplied by either I think it's either 3, 2, or 1, depending if you're finished first, second, or third. So again, the dice come in there, and they will be able to be manipulated as well. So you're doing a lot of rolling in the first phase. There's also a church type of track where every time you take a church, you're moving up the pews to the front of the church. You get more points and bonuses as you go. They've even tacked on a little movement map section where you're moving around this map and you're trying to visit these churches, I believe it is, or towns or cities, and get bonuses. They've added it like a little movement thing, almost like you've seen in games like Coimbra. That I didn't expect is that they've sort of found a way to incorporate into the roll and write as well. So there's a whole bunch of different things you're doing, but it plays fast. I remember because I was explaining the rules to the 2 people I was playing with, one of them being Carlo, another one was a friend of ours, and it's, as I'm explaining it, I'm thinking in my head, they're going to think this is way more complicated than it is, because I'm trying to be as thorough as I can. There are some things and nuances to go over, but I know in my head this is going to play fast, and sure enough, after 2 rounds, everyone's sort of looking around the table going, wow, this is going fast. fast, like a lot faster than we're expecting, to the point where if we didn't have the rules explanation, this would have been a very, very quick experience. And so the first 4 rounds fly by. You can play simultaneously, you're rolling the dice, you're marking them down, you're kind of just looking what other people are doing and laughing at the rolls you're getting and you know what people are focusing on so that you're aware of where you might have to influence dice and things like that. But most of what you're doing in the first 4 rounds is just writing down numbers on your paper, or sorry, not your paper. It actually comes with laminated boards already. So you're writing your stuff down on there and you're preparing for the second phase. The second phase, the next part of the game, basically you are no longer rolling your own dice. All your dice are taken away. There's now these set rows of dice that get rolled, and you're basically bidding on a row of dice. So at the start of each phase, all those rows are going to get rolled. You're going to see what you're going for based on what you accomplished in the first round. You might want to try to get to the top of this track that you're close on. You might want to make up ground on one that you're behind on. There's a whole bunch of things you could be focusing on. And depending what dice are rolled, you might have an interest in a different row. Now you're bidding against your opponents, but you're doing so blind. So you're going to cover up your section on the board, and you're going to write in a new value that is what you are going to subtract from your influence as your bid. Where this is where the, you know, this is where the closest tie to the meanness comes to the original Biblios. In Biblios, you know, the mean auction phase and how much people could get, you know, ousted out of contention and stuff like that came in that auction stage of the game. The same thing happens here, and where it lies here is that, you know, as an example of when I played the game with those 2 guys, with Carlo and a friend of ours, the first bid, I knew I wanted the top row really, really bad. And so I think I had like 25 influence or something. I said, okay, I got to think about this spread over 4 rounds. What should I bid here? And I said, you know, I think I feel good bidding 8. I think maybe that might guarantee me the first slot, but I'm also okay with second if need be. And it turns out both of them didn't care on this round based on the values. They didn't have any preference, and they both bid 0, which means I bid 8 for no reason. I could have bid 1 and I would have got what I wanted. And that was the most grueling thing, and it happened to me a few different times. And that is where sort of the, you know, the grueling aspect of this version of Biblios comes in, is again in the auction phase when you're starting to, you know, value things differently than your opponents and trying to go after the same things they are. After that phase, you're basically just scoring points based on how you've made it up all these tracks. As a roll and write, it has a lot of what you'd expect from a roll and write, which is great, but it does a bunch that I just did not expect. Like I don't think I've played a roll and write that has an auction element to it, at least not this true of a roll and write with this kind of auction element. And I loved the mishmash of it. The first 4 rounds feels like your standard roll and write, and the second 4 rounds doesn't feel like a roll and write at all. And I think that is, I mean, it does because you're rolling dice, but it feels very different. That's what I appreciated so much about Quill and Parchment. I think that's what I loved so much about it. Now, I don't want to make it seem like, you know, this is my favorite roll and write. It's definitely up there. I want to say this right now. If I play this enough, I could easily see this being in my top 3 roll and writes and contending for some of those spots. I need to play it more to do that. I know Carlo's impression when he first played it, he looked at me and said, you know, this might be one of my favorite roll and writes, which is a big deal because we have played a whole bunch of really great ones with like Welcome To, and that's pretty clever. And I mean, there's so many roll and writes we've played. But so Quill and Parchment does a lot really, really well by emulating some things that Biblios does, but it isn't a replacement for Biblios. And this is one of the things I want to stress. I still prefer Biblios, the original. I still feel like what I get out of it can't be replicated in this game because I want this to be a really mean, grueling experience where when I win, I feel like I really, really earned it. And, you know, when I lose, it feels like I just want to play another game to make up for that loss, or that I know I deserved based on the decisions I made, or my opponent just outplayed me. I feel like you still feel the win is earned in Biblios, but I didn't feel that same level of satisfaction. Our game ended, and you know, it was a close game across all of us. It didn't necessarily feel like this thing where at the end you're just sort of wiping your forehead, being like, "Oh my God, that was a hard-earned victory." Like Biblios can feel that way. I didn't quite get that same feeling out of Quill and Parchment, but it's still a great experience in its own right. I just think that like it really depends what you got out of Biblios, how you're going to compare these games, and which one you're going to prefer. Me personally, what I'm getting out of Biblios isn't perfectly replicated here, but this brings enough of it over that it completely surprised and caught me off guard. And if what you liked was, you know, just the auction element, but you thought it was a little too mean, for instance, this might be a preferable version for you. Like this is a slightly less mean, but very intricate and interesting Biblios-esque experience that I think you should definitely check out if you found this to be a little too overwhelming for you. The other thing I do want to mention is there are 2 other versions, I think, of Biblios. I think one's called like Biblios Dice and one's called Script and Scribes or something like that. I haven't played those versions. I know there has been discussion, like out of them all, which one do you which one's the best, which one do you get, things like that. I haven't played the other 2 versions. At some point, if we are able to get our hands on them, maybe that's something where we'll compare all the versions of Biblios and give our definitive decision. But overall, I feel like I've played the 2 of the best versions. Even if I do play the other ones, it's going to be hard to top either of these experiences for me. So I think the biggest takeaway for you is going to be, if you've played Biblios, what was your favorite part about it? And that's going to sort of influence whether or not you're going to want to check this out. If you love Biblios and you're looking for, a new way to play in general, this is going to be something you're going to want to at least try, because it offers new ways to play as well. This has a solo mode, and the solo mode was fun. I really, really enjoyed the solo mode. It does things differently. There's no, the auction obviously isn't there because you can't auction against yourself, but it still was really, really good, and I appreciated it being there. And like I said, it's a slightly less mean experience while still being mean as an auction game should. That I think you might enjoy the fact that, the aspect of rolling, it just is a little more inviting, a little more friendly than some of the things going on in Biblios. If your favorite thing about Biblios is how mean it is and just like the grueling experience and everything, and you would only want this if this is a new way to experience that, I might say, you're not going to get that exact same feeling, and you might be a little bit let down by the fact that it can't perfectly replicate it. But again, the fact that they've combined auctioning with the roll and writes so effectively is something that I think is just worth checking out, because the thing I'll say is that when we have so many roll and writes coming out all the time, like I said, we just covered Lost Cities roll and write on our channel, and my biggest criticism with that game, especially if you saw it, we covered it in our most recent Own It, Play It, Skip It reviews video. It was one of the games that we covered there, so if you haven't seen that, go check it out for my full thoughts. But one of the things I mentioned there is that, that felt like just a very basic roll and write. And it felt like they took Lost Cities and just said, hey, what's another genre we haven't done Lost Cities in? Let's do a roll and write. And they have the same essence of what it is with the different colors and everything like that and the different tracks. That's all there, but it doesn't feel necessary. You play it and it feels like I have played roll and writes just like this that have done this exact thing, but better or more effectively or more interesting. This just sort of exists. And as a basic roll and write, it's fine, but as anything else, it falls short. This actually feels like I haven't played anything else quite like it. I'm not saying nothing like this exists, because don't hold me to that. I haven't played every game out there. I haven't played every roll and write out there. But this felt unique, and in a world where there's so many roll and writes, that says a lot, and that is something that I value so much, is that I want to show this to a whole bunch of people for them to just see this new way of experiencing roll and write and combining some of our favorite elements like auctioning with the roll and write genre. I think that when you can take a genre that's, some would even say is oversaturated or just overpopular at different points and find a way to make it worthwhile playing and make it unique, you have a real hit on your hands. And so that's sort of my overall consensus with Quill and Parchment, is that you're going to be a little surprised if you're coming in and saying, oh, they're just finding a new way to, release Biblios. The first one was good. Why would I play this? I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, unless you're a Biblios purist and you just don't want to see it touched in any way. You might be offended by it still, but me coming from it as a fan of the original, I was just blown away by how much this caught me off guard. I really, really enjoyed this version of it. So let me know in the comments, have you played either of these? Have you played both? If you have, which version did you prefer? If you played the other 2 versions that I mentioned, let me know overall what your thoughts are, because I'd love to hear some insight before I dive into them myself. And again, comment in the comment section, bug Carl a little bit about his 0-point scores on Biblios. And while you're at it, he did the same thing in, oh God, why am I forgetting the name of the game? It's on Board Game Arena, Ink and Gold. Ink and Gold is another game that Carlo takes a lot of risks on Board Game Arena and in person, and ends up with either very low scores or no score at all, or then he absolutely destroys us because all the risks pay off. So he's a risk taker in board games, and to the point where sometimes he gets 0 points. But yeah, let him have it in the comments. I don't know why I keep going like this. He's not over there on that side. I think it's just one of those like gestures people are used to doing. It's completely pointless. I'm blocking my mouth from my dog who doesn't understand English. Anyways, let us know in the comments what you thought of this video. If you liked it, let me know what you think about the Biblios versions and how they compare. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Oh, you know what I should mention? I always forget to do this. I have to thank Steve Finn, Dr. Finn's Games, for sending us this copy of Biblios, Biblios Quill and Parchment. That's why we were able to do this content on and try it out and do this comparison in the first place. So thank you very much for sending us this copy of the game. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.